Respect your privilege and think about how much easier you have it. This was a line that someone said to me recently. He was talking about his own job search as a Canadian citizen and just how hard he had to work to get a job in America and especially in California. For a younger version of myself, that would have been a pretty difficult statement to digest. It also reminded me of a story of a friend who had a uniquely difficult experience getting a job in America. This is the story of how I learned that I actually had it pretty easy in my job search. When I was in my first year out of college working in San Diego, I met a girl. And as I got to know her better and better, I learned more and more about her background. She was from Thailand, and she went to an English-speaking school while growing up. And she came to America to seek education when she was 13 years old. And she slowly enlightened me to an experience that I just really didn't know about while growing up in America. I knew that it was uniquely difficult for people who were not US citizens to get jobs here, but growing up around so many Asian American immigrants, I had always assumed that if you worked hard enough, you would be given the opportunity to stay here as long as you wanted. But no, that's not even close to how it works. In America, if you were getting an education, if you're going to high school, college, postgrad, America will happily allow you to stay here as long as you like, but not after you graduate. My friend was on the OPT visa for students after graduation, which allows you to work for 1 year out of college or 3 years if you are in a STEM field. And this girl at the time, she worked at a startup at heavy risk of collapsing. The company hadn't been making as much money as they expected. They were burning through their resources very, very quickly. And for some people, the company shutting down would range from a mild to major inconvenience. But for her, it would be closer to an earth-shattering event. You see, under the OPT student work visa, if you somehow lose your job, you have 90 days to find a new one, or risk having your visa expire. And once it expires, there is no way to renew it. That's the one thing I had truly not thought about regarding my own job search. During a time when I was applying, studying, and getting rejected, I never thought it would come with the threat of being kicked out of the country I was living in. And because of this stress, her life was chaos for a while. Her only chance of staying in the country was to continually interview at companies and hope to find a new job before her company inevitably fell apart. For her job was tied to her friends and this place she called home for more than 10 years. It was the only way to maintain her life here. I saw her study every day, working on coding questions, hopping on phone interviews, going to on-site interviews, and I saw her work way harder than I ever remember working trying to get my first job out of college. But the fact was that most companies simply just did not want to interview her. They didn't want to deal with the paperwork, and they didn't want to deal with the question of what happens when her visa expires. You see, once your student visa expires, there's really only one way to stay working in America: the H-1B visa. In a nutshell, what that is a company sponsorship for you to be put into a lottery for the opportunity and the chance to work in America. Your chances of getting picked vary, but in 2023, the data says that you have about a 10% chance of getting picked. And if you don't get picked, you have to wait until the application process for the next year. And one day, the day finally came. Her startup finally ran out of money and cut all their workers. And suddenly, the clock started ticking on her 90-day grace period in America. The pressure started to increase significantly. She went through call after call, interview after interview, some rejections, some ghosting, and some on-site interviews. But all the while, the clock was ticking. 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, and eventually 10 days left. During this time watching her struggle, I thought about just how poorly I perform under pressure, how poorly I perform at interviews, even when there's nothing really on the line for me. I wondered how I would perform in these interviews if I had the added stress of if I could stay in the country that I was in, to not just be fighting for a job, but also for my livelihood. I realized during this time that I didn't have it hard at all. And at almost the last hour, in the last week before her student visa was going to expire, she was able to get an interview at a mid-sized company with a very small engineering team of 5 people. And somehow, despite all the pain, despite all the struggle, and due to all the hard work, she was able to interview on site and secure the job, with the company being willing to sponsor her for the H-1B lottery. It seemed like the stars finally aligned and she finally got her lucky break. And you would think that would be the picture perfect happy ending. Doing it all on her own, no unfair advantages, going through the whole process. She eventually started work, and she was really happy at her position. But she only had about 15 months left on her student visa when she got the position. So when 2019 rolled around, and it was time for her one and only shot at the H-1B lottery, she filled out and gathered all her documents. The company filled out the application, paid the fees, and sent it out, with nothing to do afterwards but wait. She was not selected for the H-1B that year. And even worse than that, the next morning, the CEO called her into a meeting and immediately laid her off, citing that she had no future path to being a permanent worker at the company, so it was better to cut their losses early. And that was that, the end of the journey, the end of the line. She had to leave the country. In a lot of ways, perspective is one of the greatest things that life has offered me. For me, just listening and understanding people's stories has helped me to understand and appreciate my own situations so much more. When I was younger, I would always look to what I didn't have. In school, I would look at people who were smarter, who were more athletic. In work, I would always look to the people working at better companies or making more money. I always assumed that these people just had it easier, and it would frustrate me. But seeing the difficult experiences of my friends, seeing just how hard they work, how much more stress was present in their lives, it really motivated me to put more effort into my own life. It made me think, why couldn't I work harder? Listening to the stress and the struggles of my friends was a direct influence on my decision to stop saying I was gonna do things and actually go and do them. But at the same time, even though comparison for perspective is great, it should not be everything. And just because you are having a hard time finding a job in your search doesn't mean that you're not allowed to feel sad or frustrated. We circle back to what my friend said: respect your privilege. Again, a younger version of myself probably would have been upset to hear that, telling me that my problems, they're insignificant because someone else has greater problems. But I have a different perspective on that statement now. Respecting your privilege means acknowledging other people's struggles while also acknowledging your own. It means having empathy for what others are going through, but also having empathy for yourself. And it means understanding and leveraging your own unfair advantages in life and use them to work hard to achieve the goals you are trying to achieve.